Hello, welcome back to Social Skills Unscripted. We're going to pick up where we left off from our last episode with some of the things that were going on while I was gone and Ramiro was here in charge of all of the children. So some more stories from the end of last week, just related to different interactions that kids had. We had a couple students who a while ago had a conflict due to some electronic communication mishaps and challenges, and have not seen each other in the time that that's happened. Months, it's been several months. And then they were here, one of them changed schedules, and so they are back on the same group, and they were able to work through that and resolve that completely independently. So Ramiro will talk about what that looked like and sounded like. And then one of our students has started just offering really helpful suggestions to other kids, which is a really cool thing to see. Part of that is, the relationships that the kids have with each other. Part of it, I think, is him recognizing that he can play that role, and that he can be, like a peer helper almost to some of the other kids. So like I said, we're going to pick up where we left off. And so most of this today will be Ramiro, which is my favorite, to get to hear more of his perspective on things. So here we go.
Awesome. So one thing I want to touch on is we've talked about this one student before, and he has a reputation for having big reactions. And so with that reputation, some of his peers that he has gotten to know well over the years, they'll friendly tease him in scenarios or like in games. Like for instance, this one happened while they were playing Aggravation, which is kind of like a version of Sorry. And so when you land on another person's piece, you send them back to their base and they got to start over. And for some reason they started saying, "Oh, I'm aggravating you," like when they get sent back to base. And so student A told another student that he is aggravated because he got sent back to base. And the other student just like laughed it off, like, "Oh, no big deal." But then student A made a comment to this particular student, student B, by saying, "Oh, it'd be really easy to aggravate so-and-so." And she meant that in like the literal sense, like not about the game, but, oh, it'd be really easy to frustrate him or to, get him upset. And immediately I thought in my brain, okay, we're going to have a big reaction because that tends to be his natural reaction to things, or at least an animated reaction or like a type of thing. But instead, when the student made that comment to him, he said very calmly, "Can you please not talk about that?" And the student, the student A was like, "Okay, yeah," and then that was it. But I guarantee you, she said that to try to get a reaction out of him, not to be mean or to hurt his feelings, but she friendly teases him in that way because she knows she's going to get a reaction out of him. But that student did not react at all. Instead, he gave her polite, helpful, assertive feedback and asked her not to talk about that kind of a thing. That was huge.
And because we had a whole conversation with that particular group about that topic a couple weeks ago. I think we talked about it on the show, that we turned it into a whole discussion with that group about how if people are picking out certain things about you, it's because you're doing them or because you're saying them. And so it doesn't really make sense to get upset with somebody for picking out things that we are doing or saying. And so the best way to get past that is to make different choices. If he doesn't want people calling him out for his reactivity, the best way to approach that is to not be so reactive. And so that's really awesome. That was a pretty in-depth conversation that we had with that group. And it wasn't just about him. We pointed out things about some of the other kids too. The student who has a hard time leaving her phone put away. We brought that up too, that if you don't want the other kids telling you to put your phone away, keep it put away. So that's such a proud moment, because that really is a huge challenge for that student. And that student is a really thoughtful, considerate student. And so it's this one thing that really drives his reputation.
Mhm.
It's other than that, he's such a friendly,
Yeah.
considerate dude. And so to see that he's starting to recognize the impact that that one thing has, and he's making the choice to do something different, that's going to have long-term ramifications for his
Mhm.
reputation. That was a really big step in starting to erase that, right, from his reputation.
Mhm.
So that's really, really cool.
Absolutely. And I made sure he knew that too. Like once that happened, I
Mhm.
made sure to acknowledge that and let him know, hey, that was the perfect way to react to that if you want a friendly, kind reputation.
Mhm.
Because if you react with a huge reaction or you get upset over little comments like that, your reputation is not going to change and you're going to be known as the person who's easily aggravated.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's absolutely helpful for him to make the conscious effort in those little scenarios to choose to react or respond differently. So yeah, that was awesome. And I made another note because he continued that pattern the entire night. He was here for 2 hours, I think. It was an extra game night week, so he had 2 hours of game time. And excuse me. And so the entire time I noticed he was making intentional, conscious efforts to not react as animated as he would in the past. And every single time he did, I made sure to acknowledge that and let him know, like he's doing an
Yeah.
amazing job with that.
And as we're recording this, he's coming today.
Mhm.
So we can make sure to, hey, last week, remember how blah, blah, blah. And I noticed how,
Mhm.
and just reminding him of how well it worked when he tried something different. And even I know that if we start that conversation, the other kids will chime in too.
Yeah.
And they will have noticed the difference in him too.
Mhm.
So that'll be a really cool thing for us to be able to do today, is to reinforce the choices that he made last week,
Mhm.
and remind him that they worked really well.
Absolutely.
And like I said, I know the other kids will jump in too and have, cool comments to make about him making a different choice.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. The next one that happened that same night with the same group of students in general occurred between two students who, as Steph mentioned, had a conflict in a group chat several months ago, like last year by this point. And
So yeah, outside of Starfish Social Club,
yes,
on their own.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They, as they're like teenagers and like young adults, they made the decision to like share each other's phone numbers and so they can talk and text throughout the day and whatever beyond Starfish. And so they all had a group chat together. There were maybe, I don't even know how many kids, but maybe like 4 or 5 students. Some of them go to Starfish and some of them don't. But all in all, it was a big group chat full of a bunch of teenagers and young adults. And so
Who have social learning challenges.
yes,
Right.
mhm,
So yeah, teenagers and young adults who are autistic or have ADHD.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so um as Steph had mentioned in I think it was just our last one, where teenagers and young adults might use curse words. They might use language that younger students or younger kids find inappropriate. But it becomes more a part of their daily language as they become that age. And so student A sent something to the group chat. I don't know the details, but she had sent something to the chat that had inappropriate language in it, like quote unquote inappropriate language. And
More mature language.
yes, there we go, more
Yeah.
mature language. And student B did not like that at all. So reminder, this is just there's a big group chat, but student B did not appreciate the mature language that was sent in that chat. From student A. I'm trying to keep track. And something happened where he accused her of something, or he said something to her, and was this is just from my perspective. I don't know the details, but it sounded like he said something that was rude to her. And so she ended up taking him out of the group chat and blocked his number. And so they had no communication at that point.
And it turned into a pretty significant situation. We had parents coming to us, talking to us about it. The kids were talking about it. There were a couple other kids that had different roles. So there was more than just that one situation, but the whole group chat went really sideways. But it really, I think it's, we have a whole lesson in our program on electronic communication. And part of it is how easy it is to misunderstand or misinterpret the things that are sent electronically. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened, is things that people were saying were being misinterpreted. And so there were a few kids who were just getting really upset with each other. There were also, from what we understand, again, we were not part of it, but from what we understand, there were some boundaries, that were crossed. There were some things that were said that were, parents were, and other kids were right to, be a little concerned with. So it just turned into this huge situation, and we had some requests for certain kids to not be together, which has never come up before. We're at our 7-year anniversary almost. And so for the first time, we were getting requests for certain kids to not be together. And I had offered to try to intervene because I can see exactly what this is. I can see that this is different brains just not understanding each other. To me, it was, in my personal opinion, it was something that could have been resolved in a way that would have been helpful for everybody. Because if we don't resolve it, we've still got these teenagers with challenged texting skills, right? If we can't resolve it in this situation, it just perpetuates into other situations with other people. But there were kids who were upset, there were parents who were upset, and it became a little much for me to even be able to intervene, because some people just wanted it. They just didn't even want to talk about it, deal with it. And it just really became a thing. And so I felt it was best to back myself out, because it didn't have anything to do with Starfish. And not even, as Ramiro mentioned, not even all the kids are Starfish students. I just was hoping to be able to help our students not be in that situation again, because that's always our goal. Is it's not even always about what this is, it's about how do we prevent this from happening again. But we ended up just letting it go. And so some of the students who don't come on the same day have not seen each other in months, maybe 6 months even at this point. I don't remember the exact timeline. So we then had, every time we start a new module, kids can change schedules. And so sometimes that happens. And that's what happened. One of the kids requested a schedule change, and we realized it was going to put the two main people at the center of the conflict, from our understanding. Again, we're, secondhand news over here. But from our understanding, it was going to put them together. So we were aware of it. We let parents know. We also talked to the students themselves and made sure they were aware, that this was happening with the schedule change. So last week was the first time that the students were together since all this drama ensued.
Yes. Yeah. And they ended up playing the same game together. So they were all in the aggravation group. They didn't really talk at first. They didn't really acknowledge each other at first, but they were both playing the game with the other 3 or 4 students that were in that group. But then student B, who was the guy that was removed from the group chat and his number was blocked, he said to student A, "I missed you, so-and-so." And student A responded, and she said, "Are you sorry for what you said to me?" Like she started by saying, "I miss you too," but she didn't even finish that thought, because from what I understood and from what I noticed and like how she said it, she didn't want to say that back to him. Her main concern was making sure that he acknowledged that he was sorry for what he said to her, because whatever had happened, her feelings were hurt from that, which is why he ended up being removed.
And, I think for that student in particular, A lot of our kids are, they would rather just let things go
Mhm.
and move on. So we have a whole lesson about apologizing too, and not so much about apologizing, but about when somebody says or does something that's not okay. How can we handle that? And this student is one who definitely struggles with um speaking up for herself,
Mhm.
and she gets anxious and uncomfortable sometimes when she might want to say something that she thinks might bother somebody or
Mhm.
upset somebody. So I'm really proud of her for being willing to talk about what she was thinking and how she was feeling, because she's definitely one of our kiddos that has a tendency to just not want to cause
Mhm.
conflict,
Right.
right?
Mhm. Yeah, and so after she asked student B if he was sorry, student B said, "Yes, I really am sorry for accusing you for." He didn't go into detail, but he said, "Yes, I am sorry for accusing you. I am sorry for what I said to you." And at that moment, he offered a fist bump, and she accepted the fist bump. Um, and student A said, "Thank you. I understand." Oh, wait. No, I didn't take the notes correctly. Okay. So after he had apologized and they gave the fist bump, student B said, "I don't like cursing. Or I don't like I think he did use the word cursing. I don't like cursing." And so when you sent that video that had cursing in it, I got upset and it made me uncomfortable. And so that's why I said what I said. Um, student A acknowledged that. She said, "I understand. I understand that you don't like that kind of language. And I understand why you would have gotten upset at me sending that." So right there, they are both going back and forth about what had caused the issue. They weren't just talking about the reaction that had happened or what was said after the fact. They were talking through the actual conflict and the reasoning behind the conflict, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, and so student A told him, "I understand that it can be stressful for you to be in a group chat like that." Um, student B then said, "Thank you. You don't have to put me back in the group chat, but would you unblock my number?" And student A said, "Yes, that sounds good." And she ended up in that moment taking out her phone. I saw she unblocked his number, and then she ended up sending a message to the other students that were in the group chat still, acknowledging, "Hey, just so y'all know, so and so and I are friends again. I'm not going to add him to the group chat because he doesn't want to be in the group chat, but I'm unblocking his number." And so a 6-month conflict that was not solved because they hadn't had a chance to speak in person and talk through their emotions and express how they felt based on the conflict was resolved in a matter of minutes, as if it had never happened, because the rest of the night they were going back and forth, they were joking with each other, they were all engaged with the rest of the group. Um, student B, who was the guy that was removed, it it seemed like a weight was lifted from his shoulders because I know he cares about how other people feel and he cares about his reputation. And for him to have reconciled that friendship with the other student, it felt amazing to him. And he hadn't had that chance up until that night because again, they were on different schedules, they go to different schools. And so yeah, it just could not have been resolved until that moment. But um yeah, it was incredible for that to have happened, and I made sure to tell student B, "It is okay for you not to be okay with that kind of language. It's okay for you not to like it. It's okay for you to feel uncomfortable in those kind of situations. However, just know that people your age and as you get older tend to use more mature language naturally, or in videos, or in jokes, or in whatever it might be." Um, and he said, "Okay, I understand that." Um, and I said, "So that's awesome that you want to be friends with her again. And that's cool that you guys want to text back and forth. But that's also a good thing that you're okay with not being in that group chat, knowing that that kind of language is thrown around in there sometimes."
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. We work so much on problem solving here. And so I think that's just a great example of, because they both of them were quite anxious about it.
Mhm.
I know when I talked to the other student about the fact that the schedule change was happening, she was uncomfortable with the idea of being in a group with this student again.
Mhm.
So both of them came into the situation feeling uncomfortable. And so I'm actually, in hindsight, I'm glad that the schedule change happened,
Mhm.
because we don't separate students or put students together, based on things like that.
Mhm.
We just got a phone call. So we paused that, and Ramiro stepped out to answer the phone for one of our families. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up here because we are about ready to start our next class. One more note about something from Ramiro on this last day before I came back and everything kind of returned to normal, is we have one of our older students who's been here for several years. We had mentioned him a few episodes ago where he was giving really helpful feedback to a student about putting her phone away and suggesting that maybe she keep it in her pocket. So the same student was giving another student just really kind, helpful feedback. When let's see, I'm trying to make sure I'm saying the right thing. Sorry, I may need you back here. I remember the student, but now I don't remember the situation.
Yeah. Okay. So, one of the students was like singing in the group, and this one student wanted him to stop singing, and so she shushed him really loud. And here at Starfish, we teach that it's not helpful to shush people because that's pretty rude, and so instead we give people feedback. And so the student that she was talking about heard her shush, and he said, "Hey, instead of shushing him, why don't you try saying something like, 'Hey, can you please stop singing?'" And then she tried it, and then it worked. He stopped singing, and just like that. Yeah.
That's so awesome, because I feel like this is newer for this student. It's
Yes.
like he's very alert. I mean, he's
Mhm.
paying attention to everything. And so I feel like, but this is new for him to like think of ways that he can help other kids.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
he has such a reputation for being kind and thoughtful.
Mhm.
So that just adds to it. That's
Absolutely.
super, super cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll be back next week and we'll pick up with everything that's happened since then. We'll see you guys next time.